Wish TV, All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist. Hope you and your loved ones had a happy Thanksgiving. The Indiana House will meet tomorrow to begin the process of redrawing Indiana's congressional districts. Lawmakers reversed course after pressure from the Trump administration. On Organization Day back on November 18th, Senate Leader Rod Bray said there weren't enough votes in his chamber to redraw the districts. Now, Bray says the Senate will get together next Monday, December 8th, to consider any new maps the House passes. Bray has faced intense pressure from President Trump and Governor Mike Braun to redraw the maps. At least 8 Republican state senators received swatting calls or threats of violence following Trump's public criticism. Governor Braun told us earlier this month redrawing districts is necessary to counteract Democratic gerrymandering in other states.
I just want it to be a public discussion to where you get them in the public on a vote without hiding behind closed doors.
Democrats don't have the votes to stop this, but House Minority Leader Phil Giaquinta says there's a potential snag. He says under state law and House rules, the legislature cannot change the January 5th date to reconvene without his consent as Minority Leader.
I think it's taking cues from folks out in Washington, D.C. We as Hoosiers, we don't do that. We're an independent bunch, as I've said before, and we need to make up and make our own decisions on these things.
So for more on this, let's bring in 2 members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Dana Black and Republican Mario Masalamani. Mario, I'll start with you. So back on Organization Day, the legislature adjourned until January 5th. What changed?
I believe there's a lot of pressure from the White House for them to have a vote. With the fact that the House is saying that they have the votes to get it past redistricting, I think that they want Speaker Houston to have a vote, because if it passes through the House, then it puts an immense amount of pressure to the Senate. Additionally, if they wait till that January deadline, then they have to change the election calendar, which means most people probably realize that the primary is the first Tuesday of May and the general is the first Tuesday of November. If they don't pass these new maps in December and they wait till January, then there's a huge issue with having to change the election cycle. And so that could cause serious problems with changing those election deadlines.
Dana, both Governor Braun and members of the Senate say Senate Republicans are split roughly 20-20 on this. Now, if you add in the 10 Democratic votes, that would, in theory, mean a 30-20 vote against redrawing those maps. How likely is it that math stays the same?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Republicans have not proven to me that they have what it takes to stand up against Washington, D.C. and stand for Hoosiers. Listen, you guys can talk about having the vote on the record and all of that other good stuff, but the bottom line is majority of Hoosiers do not want redistricting. And how can you say you're having a fair map when you're going to go 9-0 when 100% of Hoosiers did not vote Republican? Therefore, that means 40% of Hoosiers will not have representation in Washington based on these new maps that no one's actually even seen yet. But the bottom line is Republicans are not interested in what happens to the voters and what they feel and what they need, because honest to goodness, 40% of Hoosiers did not vote for Republicans. They deserve to have representation in Washington, and Republicans in Indiana do not care.
You know, it's funny that Dana mentions that. If you look at some states in the East Coast, like Maine, Massachusetts, there's 40 to 45% of Republicans that vote in those elections, and we have no one representing us. So there has been plenty of gerrymandering on the Democrat side. I'm not saying that 2 wrongs make a right, But I'm saying Democrats do it all the time, and they suppress the Republican voice in East Coast states. So trying to have this moral high ground is not really working out well.
What all them other states do is on them. I pay taxes right here. I pay the salaries of the elected officials in Indiana to represent me. And all this mid-cycle redistricting happened because of Texas. Everyone wants to forget that it was Texas that was the first one to say we're going to redistrict. But I'm not interested in those other states.
I've got
I live
a minute
in Indiana.
and a half left here. I do want to bring up a point that we heard just now. House Democrats are saying they're not even entirely sure if this is legal, or at least procedurally up to snuff. The adjournment motions that passed on Organization Day said January 5th. Leaving the maps aside themselves, how likely is it we see some legal challenges based around that?
I'm really not sure about that, but I have a feeling if Republicans want to meet on December 1st, that's what's going to happen, because we don't have enough votes or enough pushback to stop the nonsense, and there's not enough Republicans willing to stand on principle with the rest of the Hoosiers who say they don't want redistricting. They don't have what it takes.
Dana, as we see, there's at least 8 Senate members that have been swatted. They are standing against the White House and standing against redistricting. I'm not sure if redistricting is the right move for Hoosiers, but I think that it'll be interesting to see the vigorous discussion between the House and the Senate. And also, we don't know if it's going to be a 9-0 map. It could be a 8-1 map.
I believe if they go forward with redistricting, I believe the turnout is going to be higher than Republicans anticipate, and they're not going to have the outcomes that they were hoping for, because you can't continue to disrespect your constituents and going against their will and expect to be reelected. I have a feeling that those persuadable Hoosiers, the ones that are in the middle, will be like, listen, I voted Republican last time, but they went against our will, and there's an opportunity for Democrats to pick up seats.
Dana, Mario, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave that there. We're out of time. Thank you both for coming in. Coming up, a Central Indiana mayor tells us how the state's new property tax law could lead to service cuts down the road. Welcome back. Westfield Mayor Scott Willis says his city likely will have to cut services in a couple years due to the state's new property tax law. That's unless it raises its local income tax rate. State lawmakers have suggested they might make further changes to the state's tax system. Willis talked to our Gina Glaros.
Let's bring in Westfield Mayor Scott Willis. Mayor, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Your budget analysts estimate Westfield will lose more than $11 million by 2029 due to the new property tax law. So how did that affect your budget process this fall?
One thing that we did proactively is we cut our budget. We didn't have to. With the growth that we're experiencing in Westfield right now, we're actually doing better than most. But with the unknown and with the cliff that we're falling off of in 2028, we got proactive and we cut about 7% from our budget. We're going to put $3 or $4 million of additional taxpayer dollars into our rainy day fund, just in preparation for what may come down the road. Speaking
on that, how did you make those cuts? What cuts did you end up having to make to balance the books for the 2026 budget year?
Yeah, so every department took at least a 6 to 7% cut. Some took as much as a 15% cut. Except for public safety. Those budgets actually rose. But things we cut training out for staff. We didn't have to make any headcount cuts, thank goodness. Some services, oftentimes you supplement your staff with consulting services. And so we had to cut a lot of that out. But it was really important for me. I told my staff, we will not cut a single dollar that directly impacts our residents. So it was all staff related stuff and how we function internally that was cut out of the budget.
So now that you've had the chance to go through a budget cycle with this new law, do you think this will have more or less of an impact than you originally thought?
Well, the next couple of years, it's about what we thought it would be. And we're going to be able to navigate that through the growth that we're experiencing in Westfield. It's 2028 that really is concerning, because literally we lose $12.5 million in 2028 alone. That is not navigable. And when you look at all this growth, I mean, we've got 2 fire stations coming online next year and the year after. Each fire station is about $5 million of fixed costs into our budget. So you're adding 10 million with 2 fire stations and you're losing 12.5 million. That is a tough road or obstacle to overcome. So that's where I start to get really nervous, is what are they going to do in 2028? Because we can outgrow it these first 2 years, but we can't outgrow it long term.
What are those conversations? Or have you had those talks about what you will do in 2028?
Yeah, we talked about, like, for example, Fire Station 85, we talked about reducing the staffing and the capabilities of that fire station. Maybe we just run EMS out of there. We've talked about stopping future growth projects, road infrastructure in particular. We've got several roundabout projects planned and street widenings planned in our city. We have a $180 million comprehensive plan over the next 7 to 8 years. We're scaling that back. Those are things we can proactively do. We're going to have to maybe cut staff as well if we fall off of that cliff. $12.5 million can't all come from future projects. But right now we've got a plan. We're being ultra conservative. We're putting money in the bank and just preparing for the worst.
Yeah. The new property tax law does allow cities to pass their own local income tax subject to some limits. So do you plan to do this?
Yeah, we're going to have to. Every city will have to do that, or we won't be able to pay the bills. My hope is that we just replace what we're already getting in local income tax, that we just replace it for a one-for-one dollar, so it won't be an increase to the taxpayer. But we know there's potential changes coming, at least that's what we're hearing. So we haven't really deep dived yet in exactly what that's going to look like.
Okay, that was my next question. Do you expect further changes to these taxes during the 2026 session?
We do, at least we hope so. For example, the city of Westfield's trying to get a AAA bond rating. We would be the only city in Indiana to have that. And we thought we were going to get it this year, and we got downgraded because of the instability created from SCA 1. In particular, the annual lit that we have to approve every year by the council puts your lit bonds at risk. And so S&P didn't like that. They're like, that's not stable. So they dropped us a point. We ended up not getting the AAA bond rating. We think we'll get it next year. But that is one thing that has to change. Because if they don't, then S&P is going to look at all of our cities in Indiana and say, you know, you're at risk every year of not making bond payments because oftentimes you use lit dollars to take out debt.
What does that rating mean?
Your city is doing things right, that your debt level, that your financial strategy, all that is a healthy, you're in a healthy place. But it also affects when you go out and get loans, the interest rates that you're paying on that debt. The AAA bond rating, you'll get a lower interest rate than if you have a AA plus. Right now we're AA plus. So it's a benefit to the taxpayer if you can get that AAA bond rating. The state has it right now. Hamilton County has that right now, but I don't think there's a municipality in the state of Indiana that has that.
Coming up, childcare could be a major issue with lawmakers' return to work. The Chamber of Commerce explains why it's a workforce issue. Welcome back. Childcare and medical costs rank among employers' top concerns going into the 2026 session. That was a key message at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce's annual legislative preview this month. The Chamber's CEO tells me lawmakers should help employers explore their own solutions, such as public-private partnerships. And joining us now is Indiana Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Vanessa Green-Cinders. Vanessa, welcome to All Indiana Politics.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
During the Chamber's legislative preview event on November 17th, you asked legislative leaders what they plan to do about early learning and pre-K access. Why is that a priority?
So this early learning and childcare has been something that we've heard about from employers for a number of years. We actually did a study last year with the U.S. Chamber Foundation and Early Learning Indiana that quantified the economic impact of the kind of lack of childcare at $4 billion a year for Indiana. So for us, it's about workforce, right? And making sure that our workforce can show up and our employers have the workforce that they need. And I guess, you know, in addition to that, it's about workforce because it's about starting to educate our, Hoosier kids to make sure they can be kind of their best selves as they move into the workforce in the future.
What are some things you've seen in other states that you think might work here?
So, I could talk about other states, but I could also talk about Indiana, where, we hosted a early learning and childcare summit with leaders a couple weeks ago to talk about this issue and talk about some of the innovative solutions, public-private partnerships, employers stepping in to address some of these challenges and issues. There's lots of work going on in all corners of the state. Fort Wayne has kind of a pilot going that is a tri-share model that brings kind of government and employers and the individual together to think about this. I was in Evansville earlier this week talking to some business leaders who are working on kind of solutions and coming together. So my view is that kind of it's going to take all of us working together. And I would also say, the legislature, last legislative session, we worked with legislators, including Senator Charbonneau and others, on kind of thinking about the regulatory environment for childcare providers and making sure that we do everything we can to kind of encourage those centers, encourage the growth of those centers.
How concerned is the chamber about the recent cuts to the Indiana Child Care Development Fund vouchers?
So, I mean, look, it is, there are some challenging fiscal realities, right, that the state has had to deal with because of kind of the changing fiscal landscape, and everyone has had to tighten their belts. And so obviously, kind of lack of funding is something that we are concerned about. But also, look, it's an opportunity, again, for all of us to come together and try to find other solutions and ways to work together. And that's what we are committed to doing as the Indiana Chamber and with employers and other stakeholders to try to address this.
I want to turn to something else you brought up during the legislative preview. What role could employers play in Medicaid cost sharing as required under the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill?
So, look, Medicaid funding is obviously, Senator Bray talked about it at the legislative preview, but it's a significant and growing portion of the state budget. And kind of thinking about how to make sure that those who need coverage, right, Hoosiers who need that coverage get it, while also recognizing the fiscal realities that we just talked about, is something that the state and all of us are grappling with. I think from the Indiana Chamber's perspective, we are thinking about it from, when changes are made to Medicaid, what does that do for kind of private insurance and the employers who are paying for kind of private insurance, and what cost shifting is there, and how can we kind of mitigate that, and again, work with stakeholders, work with the state to figure out the best solution.
Tell me about the role that medical costs play in workforce retention, because the chamber consistently says that workforce retention is one of your biggest concerns.
So yes, workforce is a key concern and kind of priority for us. And look, we have 70% of our Indiana Chamber members are less than 50 or up to 50 employees. And so one of the ways that we have really kind of focused on addressing healthcare, because it is a big issue, is by offering a small business health plan for those businesses with up to 50 employees. It's called Chamber Care. We have an enhanced new offering with a new provider that this year actually delivered a 0% premium increase to participating employers, again, because we are just trying to bring innovative solutions to small businesses in Indiana, because we know that healthcare is a key need that small businesses want to offer to their employees, and it's an important piece of the puzzle, and we want to help provide those resources and those solutions.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. We'll have full coverage as lawmakers begin the process of redrawing Indiana's congressional district maps. As a reminder, legislative leaders say they're doing this by starting the 2026 session early. So they plan to adjourn by the end of February. They normally would have started on January 5th. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast. You can find it online at wishtv.com. In addition to the full episodes, you can find extended interviews with state and federal lawmakers and even with international political figures. Have a great rest of your Thanksgiving holiday weekend. We'll see you next Sunday.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.